Good morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's, the number one Vikings morning show for the 56th best fan base in the world.
That airs from 9:30 to 10:30 every Friday morning in Minneapolis, right? No,
Our show?
I'm trying to qualify it even more since number one. So.
Yeah. I'm Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com. Here with Joe Oberly.
Good morning, Joe Johnson.
Can you tell I'm back on the horse?
How long will that last?
Which made it sound like I'm relapsed on heroin somehow. I meant the Vikings fans, or the Vikings team, and my support for them. I was a little doomy and gloomy on Tuesday, but yeah, why not?
We've come to know you that way, Joe. What are you going to do if Joe's excited? Then I start getting worried. So.
Tell me about it. Joe's the editor for Purple PTSD and Vikings Territory. He also writes for the sportspost.com. Yeah, it feels like a prelude to a playoff game.
Yeah, but I don't want to say that. I saw that you listed that in the agenda. Must win, I'll call it. You finally got me over there. But if you call it a playoff game, that means they lose, they're done. So
yeah,
I wrote they're essentially done if they lose. They need this one to, but they still could win. I mean, the Bears very easily could lose to the Rams this weekend, and the Vikings could win out, and such. All things can happen still with 3 games to go. But I wouldn't call it a playoff game, but it's going to have probably that sense of urgency for Minnesota.
Well, if for those that tuned in on Tuesday, we talked a lot about the Patriots game and a lack of that urgency. It just didn't seem like they showed up, or I don't know. I'm trying to, there was a good article about Kirk Cousins' season and how the perception is that he's not played well in quote-unquote big games. The piece, which I believe is a fan-sided piece, basically said that there's been 7 big games this year. I don't know how they quantified that. They didn't really say. The crux of it was that it's more perception than reality, at least when you look at his stats. But the qualifier also is that he's had some garbage time stuff, but I think in those 7 games he's been 73.4% completions, 7.6 yards per attempt, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and a 104.2 passer rating. I think the passer rating is probably the most indicative of how those games have gone. And I don't know if because of, he did have a couple, like the first Packers game, actually both Packers games, the Rams game, he had amazing games in those games. And if people's expectations were set too high there, or if it's a legitimate struggle, I've been a Cousins apologist for a long time. I think it's not a perception thing. I don't know how much of it is him versus the play calling or some mix therein. But as someone who really argued for wanting him to come here and who has apologized for him in a lot of ways, I do feel like this is not what they want. I mean, this is not what their expectations were bringing him in. He was brought in to win the big games, and the Vikings still haven't beaten a team with a winning record. So I'm not going to lose the little bit of credibility I have left by saying, well, look at his stats. Stats don't matter. Oh, God, I sound like Luke now. Stats don't matter. Touchdowns don't matter. But I can see, the argument where people say he's padding his stats. He's not doing that intentionally, but yeah, I think that this game is huge. If the Vikings don't show up or Cousins throws a couple picks, it's going to be a nightmare. I mean, there's so many fans grumbling about him, his play. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think if the Vikings lose, you and Cousins have to leave town.
And run away together like I've always wanted to?
I mean, since you're the leader of the bandwagon, I mean, come on, Joe. I think people put too much stuff into this. They expectations and because he's making so much money and he's not, and the Vikings were on the precipice last year, and all these things are a perfect storm to say, okay, perform or die. I've maintained from day one that it's a 3-year plan. Certainly it's a 2-year, and I expect and hope to see better things next year. But if the Vikings then lose their offensive coordinator, so they have to start over with a new, you probably get a little bit there, but I've seen some things from him that I've been very impressed with. I've seen some things that I have not been impressed with. I look at the game differently than perhaps you and a lot of fans do, whereas, the other team has something to say about what happens in a game. And just because this and this and this have happened in the stats and this person gets paid this much money and he was brought in with this thought in mind, doesn't mean squat as to what's going to happen on Sunday. Now, if you're not happy with how he's performed, well, that's your right. And I'm willing to see how the season finishes, when it's really important in December, starting with this game, and see how they finish up and see to what extent Kirk Cousins has helped that or enabled it, made it happen, and places where he didn't, and assess it in that regard. I don't care about being the first one out there to say, oh my God, this guy's terrible, we got to get him out of here so that I was right when they do, or vice versa. So, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to that. I think he's done some really good things. I think he's got, he was an upgrade at quarterback. Every season's different, and we all have that memory of last year in mind. And, I was wishing they kept Case Keenum. I don't, I've come around to understand the reasons why they didn't. I never liked the price tag on Cousins coming here, but that's part of doing business in the NFL. That's what you get. So I don't know. I think you're gonna get a guy that's gonna do everything he can, from studying to practicing to his teammates to get it done. If he doesn't, so be it. It stinks, but we'll see. I'm kind of bullish on. I last week for the Patriots game, I thought I let my purple corpuscles, beat a little bit for me, and I predicted a Vikings win. And then as the week went on, I should have, retracted a little bit because I realized that Patriots are getting healthy and it's a tough place to play, and I didn't really do that. This week I'm still feeling a win, but it's going to be a battle. I think the Vikings should beat them. I think, they're going to get fire up. They're going to be fired up from a standpoint of their interior defensive linemen going back to Seattle and wanting to sack Russell. It's going to be a whale of a game on Monday. They can win it. Doesn't mean they will, but I'm hoping they'll play a heck of a lot better than they did last week.
Yeah, and the Broncos are making a playoff push, which is interesting. Kind of put a bow on that. What things you mentioned? There are things that you've been impressed with and not impressed with. What are the things that you haven't been with Cousins?
His turnover propensity. For whatever reason, that's been a little high. His seemingly uncomfortableness in the pocket. I see other quarterbacks that Mitch Trubisky looks at times more comfortable in the pocket than Cousins does, because he knows he can run and still make a play, even if the play breaks down. Where I think, Cousins tries to make the plays to the end, and sometimes it gets him caught. He doesn't sense the rush, and that's a concerning thing. I mean, that is a huge juxtaposition from last year when Case Keenum had an uncanny ability to know when the thing was crashing in on him and when to go, or to fight or flee. And he made the call so many times so well. And Cousins just, for some reason, doesn't have that. And maybe it's because, like Zimmer said, he likes to hang on and try to get that big home run ball. Well, that sounds to me like that's coachable, and you have to learn to change that way of thinking. You're never going to change his ability to sense the rush, but the idea that you can't always go downfield, you got to be able to rein that in, and they got to be able to teach him, say, this is what we want, so don't sit here and look for these guys deep all the time. Take it when you get it. You got to be able to take what the defense gives you from time to time, and we've seen Brady and Breeze both do it. Dump down short passes and pick away. And if Cousins can't do that, someone's got to teach him how, and he better start.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk before the Patriots game about the stuff that he does, like real new era type scientific, like brain training. Something that I think Brady has done. He's really committed to the Tom Brady diet, and it is amazing that it's something the passing, just if you can't sense it or feel it, maybe, and I'm sure they've tried this, but saying, okay, on average you have X amount of time to get rid of the ball, try it. We talked a lot about the Packers game and how he had seemingly reined in some of those things you talked about, waiting too long, forcing the ball down the field. That's where a lot of those devastating interceptions have happened. And then it felt like, looking at the stats from the Patriots game, that maybe that was pushed to the limit or too far. I think the average yards per pass attempt was 4.6, which is, like 60% of the Vikings average, which is 7.8 yards per attempt, which I think is 8th best in the league, which is a good sign since the Seahawks give up about that much per attempt too. But it'll be interesting to see if the type of balance they're looking to strike in that regard. Getting the ball down the field on a defense they can pass, but also continuing to attempt to limit those mistakes, since the Vikings have been in a lot of these quote unquote big games, but it's just been the turnovers that have killed them.
About running the ball.
Yeah.
Run the
yeah.
If they're set up the defense to take away your long passes, run the damn ball. I mean, it was the most effective thing last week, and it doesn't, and there's a reason why, but they started out just dumping passes to Cook, and which is a fine thing, but you can't do that every play, because then they're gonna know what's coming. Trust your line to play well and run the ball up the middle and see what Cook can do there.
I think one of the big positives for Cousins coming into the season was that he is a great play action quarterback, and they haven't done that.
Nope. And granted, Cook's been out too, so you got to factor that in. He missed like 5 games or something.
Yeah,
like that.
And he looks good. So
looks good.
They're speaking of people turning on Cousins, depending on what happens Monday night. The DiFilippo hatred is at an all-time high, and we've touched on this a lot, but at some point, they have to play like a team that's not down by 30 points in the fourth quarter, and establish some semblance of a balance, and it seems to work, and then they've gotten away from it in his defense because of the way that some of these games have gone. But you cannot win this game if you're not running the ball, especially if you can get a lead late in the game. You need to be able to run the clock out. And, even looking at the playoffs, a lot of people are kind of singularly focused on that. But, and you want to make it because then you have a shot, and it's better than not having one. But if they're throwing the ball, 45 times a game, I think their average is 41 times a game.
That's high.
It's not championship level football. So we'll see. There's a couple of just clickbaity fan things I wanted to touch on, since depending on what happens. Yeah, we can get through them real quick. The first, well, they're similar. So I never knew what skull meant, and I don't think a lot of people do. And so I thought this was interesting because they talked to some linguists and historians who said that skull means bowl, like a food bowl, and that the myth is that the Vikings used to say it before taking a sip of beer from the skulls of the people that they just killed. Apparently that's not true, but it is meant as a cheers or something like that. So I thought that was interesting. And the other thing was that Fansided does these top 250 lists of everything, movies, music, and the Vikings made the top 10 in regards to a fan base. It's said that they have a better fan base. How they measure that, I'm not sure, than the Patriots, than the Seahawks, surprisingly, with the 12th man. They're behind a few teams, like the Packers. I think they're 8th overall, which is, in the top 33 percentile. But on that list of 250, they're 56th, as I alluded to earlier, which I don't know. I know soccer fans are crazy, but I've always kind of wondered why the Vikings have such a strong national and international fan base. We have a podcast that is in Spanish. I talked about that last show, that there's competing groups in Monterrey, Mexico, that have 100 people show up every week to their parties. And I know a lot of the people that write for us that aren't from Minnesota, that are around my age, have said that they came of football age during the Randy Moss, Chris Carter, Dante Culpepper era, and that kind of endeared them to the team. But I guess it's a little surprising just because of the lack of success the team has had, that they have this sustained national fan base. And I don't know if that started in the 70s with those teams or...
Yes. And then all the dads left Minnesota because it's too damn cold here. So they went spread around the country. The Vikings have a good fan base. There's no two ways about it. I can only point to one thing that I'm familiar with. When I was covering them for CBSSports.com, I was a rapid reporter for the Vikings for a couple of years, and they had one of me, like a person like me, in every town, covering their team. And after a while, the program was not doing well enough, so they reduced it to like the top 11 teams that got a lot of hits on their site. And the Vikings, thanks to their fans, were one of those, and so I kept the job another season. And then they finally reduced it to just a couple people covering everybody. But my point is, I was surprised, because there was a lot of people checking it out. They're a big fan base. There's a lot of interest, and it does go back to the 70s. I grew up with them at that point, and they would win every year, Joe. It got to be where you expected it, and if they weren't, I hate to say this because it's almost Packer fan-like, but if they weren't in the playoffs, you were really like, what the heck's going on here? But they were, and you just took it almost as a given that you're going to get your 8 home games and you're going to get a couple more in the playoffs, and it was it was phenomenal. They dominated the division, and in a lot of ways the NFC, where they obviously went to 4 Super Bowls and lost, and that probably made people want to say, okay, next year is our year, next year.
Yeah.
And they went back enough times to make people believe it. Bud Grant was an icon. The players were, they had their own style where he had them outside in the cold and they were beating all these warm weather teams, and it became the winningest fan base. I mean, at that time, the Twins weren't been around that much longer. I mean, maybe a season, and the North Stars came in after that, and so it became the winningest franchise here in the professional franchise in the state. And I've talked to people. I've asked them, they'd grown up elsewhere, and they said, well, I liked them in the 70s. I like the team. And I've always heard there's people say their logo is just one of the best logos ever created out there.
Yeah, and it's one of the best names also.
Right. So, I mean, there's any number of reasons for it, but it is a huge fan base. We don't sit there and tout it like the Packers do and say we're the greatest fan base ever. And so I really don't care about this article. I know that there's a lot of great, huge numbers of Vikings fans, and they're very passionate, and that's all fine and good enough for me. So.
What was it like? What was the sentiment after those Super Bowl losses? I know that at least for 2 or 3 of those, they were heavily favored. The Chiefs won, maybe not the Steelers won, but were people as a whole angry, or was there the feeling like you said, well, we'll get them next year?
I mean, it was a little bit of both, but I can't speak to it because I wasn't. I don't know how old you think I am, but I wasn't an adult back then.
Didn't you? You were born during the Calvin Coolidge?
Apparently. No, I mean, I remember I was 10 years old when the first one, and I was kind of devastated. I was right around my birthday, and after the game, we had a skating rink in my backyard, and everybody went out to play, and I stayed inside and sulked a little bit because I was really thought it was lined with Joe Cap. His name was Joe. He's my favorite player. Was the quarterback, and it was all lined up for me, and it just went to hell. And so I remember being devastated by that one. But then as time went on, I mean, they were either close or getting there every year, and so you're excited about it, you followed it, and then you learn to wait until next year. Sure, there was disappointment. I can't say what people that were older than me. I mean, we did. One of them, I was hitchhiking to California. I guess the one against the Raiders when we got to California, and we were legal to drink in California or back here in Minnesota, but not out there. We got kicked out of 3 bars just trying to watch the game, and ended up watching it on the counter of a Sambo's restaurant on a black and white TV that you could hardly see it. Like snow everywhere, so it was pretty frustrating. But I had just gotten to California the first time, so after Oscar Reed fumbled for the second time, we said, "Okay, that's enough."
That's writing's on the wall. While we're talking about this, I've always wanted to ask you something. This is tearing me and my dad's relationship apart. Who didn't have a TV growing up, so he had like a little radio that he would sit in his attic and listen to the Vikings game, which is pretty diehard. One of the big year that got away was I think 75 with the Cowboys and the push off. I've watched that video 1,000 times, and people are I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for this, but I do not think he pushed off. And I was wondering what your take was on that.
I gotta go now.
I know. I feel bad even saying it aloud, but it just doesn't. It didn't feel like it.
He did push off, and I don't know what you're looking at. They don't have the camera views that they have today where you can see him. But I don't think he shoved him hard. I don't think it was a flop, but he pushed off. That's beside the point. On the same play, the defensive tackle's jersey was stretched so far that a holding could have been called. On the play before that, there was a penalty or he was out of bounds on a pass that they called in. You didn't have replay. It was Saints like, Saints game like where every flipping thing went their way and it could have.
And the ref from like the linesman ran down the field, signaling touchdown, which wasn't his job. And my dad was at that game, and it's always been like a Vikings lore outside of the push-off because some amazing human being sidearmed a whiskey bottle and hit that ref in the head as he was in like a full sprint down the field, and I think he knocked him out. And I've always wanted to track him down. Knocked him over.
He was a goalie for my brother's hockey team. So
that is such a. I remember you telling me that, and that's such a mystery solved. What a hero.
Well, he was, like I said, he admitted to throwing a bottle. He said didn't hit the guy, but he said he admitted to throwing a bottle, so they pinned it on him. And my brother, who was there with him, said he thought it did. So it's hard to say because it wasn't the only whiskey bottle coming out of the stand.
Yeah, I suppose. The good old days. Let's get into the Friday's 5 Furious Facts.
Okay, well, we can't necessarily say the fact that I just relayed is a fact for sure, but that's a big win. The fact we can say is he pushed off, damn it, so cut it out, Joe.
I know, I'm the worst.
All right, here's what I got. For number one, the Hawks were slightly better against the run, allowing 116.8 rushing yards per game which ranks them 17th in the league, than they are against the pass, ranked 19th with 250.7 passing yards allowed. The Vikings should be able to run a balanced attack against this team, so I really like them to see. I think you will see them try to establish Cook early. It's outdoor venue, but that didn't stop Cook last week. I don't know what the weather's going to be like, but it should probably be similar to what it's out on the coast, so it's not going to be perhaps major heavy snowstorm. I don't know, but it'll be a night game. It'll be chilly, but so I think they should just get that line cranking, running the ball, and tell Kirk to just settle down. You don't have to make up $84 million in one game here. Just do your thing. So
yeah, we talked about this too. It seemed like maybe the line had its best game against the Patriots, ironically, and that Cook did have success coming into it. I do think that that's going to be one of the main keys to this game is who wins in regards to the run game on both sides of the ball. The Seahawks are the number one rushing team in the league in regards to attempts. I think they have 32 attempts, 31 point something per game. Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty decent running the ball, and you also got what's his name, which Russell Wilson runs the ball too. I guess that's my second.
Yeah.
He has 9 touchdown passes, which is 4th in the league, which is impressive. But he also has 425 rushing yards, which is on 45 attempts, and he's ranked 9th in the league. So
that's what an average of 10.
Yeah.
Yikes.
No. It's like 5.4.
Okay, yeah, their yards per attempt is 4.7, which is pretty gaudy.
Yeah, and part of that's due to him, and because he's always been able to get out there. He, unlike Cousins, likes to sprint out and throw on the run. He's very good at it. It's very comfortable, and that's one thing I wish Cousins would get better at, because I think it would open the offense so much more. I mean, how many of these, other than statures like Brady, who's got the arm and whatever to sit back in the pocket for forever, there's plenty of more successful quarterbacks out there who get out of the pocket. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, even Trubisky's good that way.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers when he's not hobbled. So I just wish somehow he would make that part of his game and just practice that all summer, throwing out.
They give it to him too. I mean, there's been countless examples of this where he could have picked up a first down and some and hasn't. And I saw a statistic last week that I mentioned about his success doing it. A lot of people don't think he's been great at it because they haven't done it a lot, obviously. But his numbers are good when he does it.
They always teach a quarterback to keep your eyes downfield, keep a play alive, and I think that's part of his makeup. And he's almost to a fault where, some guys Keenum last year, as soon as play broke down, he was generally going, and he'd look for the hole rather than keep looking downfield to see. And to Cousins' credit, he does try to keep the play alive, but that also, if that's what you're focusing on, that's how some of those fumbles creep in, because as you're running through the line, looking downfield with your ball in one hand ready to pass, they can swat it out of there. If a guy's going to tuck it away, he's probably going to fumble less. So.
Yeah, and it is a little scary that this game is this important, and the Vikings' kryptonite, this defense for the last couple of years, has been mobile quarterbacks. It's hopefully Sheldon Richardson and Linval can get some, push up the middle. I know
Tom Johnson, don't forget him. Ooh,
yeah,
he's gonna be ready to go. He's gonna be ready to open up a can of medieval on their tailbone, which is two cliches at once. So.
And the Seahawks' offensive line was brutal last year. I think people have been saying they're the most improved unit, in the NFL, unfortunately, but they're still not, great. So that's gonna be extremely, extremely important. Or having a spy on them. Let Barr do that, since he can't cover running backs or anything anyway. So might as well let them run free and just post Barr up.
My third fact is Wilson also has 9 fumbles, which is T2 in the league, and one more than
total or lost.
Let's see. No, total fumbles.
Okay.
Not lost, I don't think. Now you're screwing me up here. Let's see.
Well, I think it's total, because you said that they only have 9 turnovers on the season too, right? So they're not all that.
They've turned the ball over 9 times as a team. So yes, he's had 9 fumbles, which is, I think he's lost 2, if I remember correctly. But he's tied. He has one more than Cousins, one more fumble than Cousins. Cousins, I think the Vikings have lost more. Anyway, as a team, they have 20 takeaways for a differential of plus 11.
Ugh.
The Vikings have better watch out, because they'll be going for more. You can certainly be sure of that.
And they're not great. The Vikings even at their peak weren't a great turnover team. Anthony Harris is getting a lot of shine, deservedly. He's been probably definitely the most improved player, but the one of the biggest bright spots this year, and he seems to have a nose for picking the ball up. So hopefully he can continue his awesome year.
I don't throw a lot of picks, but so I don't know how much the Vikings will get, but there's opportunities like in any game. Defensive end for the Seahawks is Frank Clark, and he's tied for 9th in the league with 10.0 sacks on the season. They're going to have to protect old Captain Kirk from that invasion, because they'll be busted across the line trying to do something. And on the other side of the coin, Wilson was sacked 12 times in the first 2 games of the season. But he's also been sacked 12 times in the past 4 games, which means the O-line is playing better. And Danielle Hunter hasn't had a sack in 3 games, so it's time for him to get off. I think you are going to see some pressure up the middle from those guys. They're going to be fired up, because they're going to want to, they got 2 linemen or 3 techniques that have been spurned by the Seahawks in the past year. So they're going to want to, show them, that you made a mistake. They're going to want to go on flex in front of the bench, just like Cordero Patterson did last week. And,
do you feel like teams are doubling Hunter or scheming to mitigate his
I would think so.
ability lately?
I haven't looked to see if that's happening, but I'm sure it probably is. I mean, they're probably chipping him. They're probably doing all kinds of things, because he did have the big numbers, and And on the other side of the line, Everson has not been the same player he has been in the past. So
Yeah.
So there's your opportunity. It comes down to getting push up the middle. If you can get the push up the middle and make the quarterback back up, to a point where the ends can swoop in and get him, then you're going to get more sacks that way. But if you don't get any push up there, he stays up in the pocket, and there's no room for the defensive ends to get in and get around to get him. So I think that's a huge part of it. So expect to see more of that, because I think you're going to get some push out of those guys this week. If not this week, then never, because there's so much on the line. They got to be fired. They have to be fired up and ready to play. And so I expect a good game out of the defensive line, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, it's a big one, and there are those narratives there. It is surprising that the rivalry between the fan bases, between the Vikings and Seahawks, isn't bigger. I don't think there's been a set of two teams this century across the whole league that have had more intertwined fates than these two teams, starting with the poison pill. Then you have the Seahawks repeatedly trying to screw the Vikings over by overpaying mediocre receivers and getting burned. Sidney Rice, Percy Harvin, Nate Burleson was there. It never seems to work out for them.
No, the Vikings got the future Hall of Famer out of the deal with Steve Hutchinson. But you make a good point. And then there's the Blair Walsh kick was against them in the playoffs. They should have beat him. There is a little bit of history there. I don't know. I'm sure there's no love lost amongst the fans and the fan bases for that reason. That there was a lot of anger back and forth during that whole poison pill time, but we've kind of moved on from then, and the Packers have kind of supplanted them with the rivalry. They had what do they call it, the Fail Mary play that happened, and then and then Brian Bostic's fumble of or he didn't play the onside kick, and they went to the Super Bowl and the Packers didn't. So there's a little bit of history there, and people talk about that more than they talk about the animus between the Vikings and the Seahawks, I think. So that would be why. But yeah, it's certainly there. The history is there between these two, and their head coach, what's his name? Can't even think of it.
Pete Carroll.
Carroll supposedly, at least to Sid Hartman was campaigning for Pete Carroll to be the head coach of the Vikings when they went, I think.
He was on Burns' staff?
Yes, for a number. I'm on Bud Grant's staff, to be honest. Oh, okay. And I think Burns as well. And he was the next up-and-comer, and they didn't hire him. I think they went to, God, if they go to Les Steckel, oh my God. And somebody that they didn't hire him, and he went to Canada, and then he went to the college ranks, or I guess he ended up out as a Patriots coach for a while, and then he went back to USC, and now he's out there. So, I mean, it's a long, this game is so, not want to say inbred, but I mean, you can find connection between just about any team if you look hard enough. So,
yeah. So three keys, I believe, to the game is, we talked about stopping the run. Something's got to give there. The Vikings, or the Seahawks rather, average 148.8 rushing yards per game, 4.7 per attempt. The Vikings give up 99.2 and an average of 3.7. So a whole yard per carry, 50 yards. You got to think. Like you said, with this D-line, I'm a little worried about Kendricks being banged up for run support, but that's gonna be huge. Dalvin Cook needs to be made the focal point of this game. If he's not, I don't. We talked about this on Tuesday. This idea that DeFilippo's the early favorite for the Packers job, and actually some people listening to the show, I got a couple of people that either texted or said something on Twitter saying, yeah, let DeFilippo leave, please. So that'll be huge. We've talked about why. We've talked about the Zimmer being really hands off in that regard, but God, Come on,
What?
guys. It's relatively frustrating. You know, I wanted to bring this up earlier. I do feel like, you know, every time the Vikings have blown an NFC Championship game, if you want to call it that, the next season is typically an unmitigated disaster. And I do feel like this season had potential to be that way, just based on the injuries, Everson Griffin's thing. You had, you know, Sperano passing away. Just a lot of negativity, and on one hand it is relatively astounding that they are, you know, above 500 despite all the things that have happened. But like you said earlier, you know, expectations were so high. I can't remember outside of maybe 2010 or, well, obviously 2009, but a season that had this much hype, and it hasn't been obviously as bad as 2010 was. But it's just, it is frustrating, you know. I not necessarily disappointed in how things have gone. It's just how they've transpired, you know. Just not seeing the fight that we're used to. I don't know if you watched that game last night, but there was that amazing Derrick Henry run where he stiff-armed like 3 guys.
No, I did not see. I see everybody talking about it this morning.
It was like AP against the Browns times 3, and you just got the sense that the Jaguars were done.
Oh yeah,
the guys were just not, you know, they didn't commit to the tackles. They got completely just, you know, outworked. It wasn't that he's the strongest man ever. It's just that they all 3 of them were just coming in there half-assedly, and it reminded me of some of the stuff I've seen from the Vikings this year, and so, you know, the season's never over till it's over, and, you know, Cousins talked a lot about, and the team has, you know, winning these 4 games, how important it is that, you know, they control their destiny. It's coming down to these 4 games. This is, you know, there's not talking about the past. Let's focus on these 4 games, and, you know, we're right where we need to be because we can, you know, win out and make the playoffs, or, you know, 3-1 or whatever. But you know, the disconcerting thing for me just has been that the fight seems to be gone. You know, the urgency from that we expected it against the Patriots wasn't there, and I don't really know if the team is maybe tired of Zimmer's way of running things. Maybe, you know, there was talk about him being too negative or too vocal in the press about players, but it just feels like something is amiss, and I don't know what it is.
You feel better now? You feel better, Joe?
This is, for me,
like cutting open a vein over there.
Well, I should probably tell you that I write all this off on my taxes as a medical expense.
Nice.
All of our shows, it's therapy. But, you know, yeah, it's kind of late in the season to say, well, I hope they can, you know, show up, and I hope they can finally beat a team with a winning record. It's just, I didn't expect this, man.
I don't care if they beat a team with a winning record. I just hope they get in the playoffs. You know, you've heard me say this a million times, and I'll say it again. I mean, they're human beings. I mean, you don't need to look any further than the Jaguars last night. That's a team that's defeated. That's a team that went to AFC Championship and should have won it last year, just like, you know, perhaps the Vikings shouldn't have won the NFC Championship. They got their butts handed to them. But the loser of the Super Bowl and even these games, it's hard to rebound mentally because you have to put in so much time, so much effort, so much mental, and the guys talk about it all the time. And I think fans hear it so much that they tune it out when these guys say how much effort, you know, this is what we've worked for this point. They're trying to fire themselves up because they have to mentally get up to peak levels to beat teams in this league. If you're not on par with them, you're going to get beat. I think I saw it happen to the Vikings in 3 or 4 Super Bowls. They were not. Bud Grant was not a master emotional
motivator. Okay.
He might have been a motivator, but he wasn't rah-rah. He wasn't, you know, something to get your blood boiling. He just, you know, told him to put him in the right positions to win and said, you know what you're supposed to do, and, you know, basically go do it. And I mean, even back then, you heard people talk about that about Bud. If there's anything negative you can say about it, he was not that kind of guy. I think it's, as a result, I consider that to be a huge deal. You have to, we had Chad talk about it a couple weeks ago on the show. Chad Greenway, excuse me, talking about you cannot get up for every game. These guys are human. They hear people say things about them, and this affects them one way or another. But I just look at the Jaguars. They are mentally done. They were so early in this season, and things weren't going their way. Then they started losing faith in their quarterback, and so they put in a quarterback, and the defense, which is supposed to be dominant, has nobody other than a chippy cornerback to that's what cares to do anything. I fully expect them to be back next year because they'll make changes. They'll find the players that
the
don't.
Jags?
Yeah, that don't eat and sleep and poop football, which is what I think the Vikings are trying to build around. I mean, I think that's what you need. It is a mentally exhaustive as well as physically exhaustive thing to play 20 football games in a year. And when you extend it into the playoffs, it drains you even more. So you cannot expect them on a realistic basis to just line up and be the same the next year, If we've heard before, when you get your shot, you better get it because you might not get it next year. Every year's different. That stuff's cliche, but it's all true.
Yeah, and the Jags, too, the frustration with the defense feeling that they had to play either perfectly or bail out the offense all the time, that gets old quickly. The Vikings don't have that problem. There has been flashes of brilliance.
This year, and in the past, though. I mean, last year was the defense bailing out the thing. So if you expect the defense to be the same dominant force it was last year, it just doesn't happen. I don't know if anybody's ever studied that, but you should go back and look at how teams that have gone deep in the playoffs or ended up with a huge disappointment, how they've done it next year. Typically, Super Bowl losers fall off the map. Look at the Falcons. They were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, weren't they?
Yeah, I think there's a high percentage of Super Bowl losers that don't even make the playoffs the next year.
Right. It just happens, and I think the same goes for those that come to the edge of going to the Super Bowl. It doesn't naturally follow that you just get right back on the horse and you take the next step. We all want that. We all expect that. We all hope for it, but it doesn't work that way. And so what you have to do is then you take this. That's why I keep preaching it's a 2 to 3 year program with Cousins. If we expected him to be the swoop in and be the promised guy that's going to get this team over the hump and take him to the Super Bowl, then he would have been gone a long time. But then the guy named Washington team would never let him go.
Yeah, I would love to see if what the Vikings record would be if they had the same points allowed on defense. Yes. So last year they had like 15.8. Now they're about a touchdown over that. And so maybe, I know a lot of people are down on the offense, either the coordinator or just on Cousins. But yeah, I mean, you said, there's
went to the Rams game, and if the defense was better, they would have won that one. In the first Packers game, they gave up a lot of points, and even the San Francisco game, they were not great. And then you got the Buffalo game after thrown in there. They started off until they switched things up. They were not playing well on defense. They're playing better now, but maybe they're still not at the level that they were last year.
Not even close. I mean, they're still giving up about 20-some points a game.
Every year is different. That's all you can say. You still have similar personnel, but players have other things happen in their life that maybe takes their focus away a bit. I don't know. I don't put that much. I don't have that much expectation for them. I say I try the best I can to listen to what these guys are saying and read between the lines and say, they are going to try like hell to win on Monday night and win 3 or maybe 4 of these last games and get themselves in the playoff because there's a check for them waiting there if they make the playoffs. But they aren't as concerned and disheartened and just distressed as you are.
Unfortunately, I guess that's probably a good thing.
So I mean, you got to think of them as human beings rather than numbers, and I try to do that. I don't always, I got used to it in the 70s. Like I said earlier in the show, that we expected them to win because they were that good, they were that well coached, and they were that talented, and the Packers were terrible, and and the Lions were the Lions.
The good
so
old
you expected it every year, and when it started not happening, it was difficult to deal with, but that's where I learned, And so now it's actually a different league these days. I mean, what the Patriots are doing is quite an anomaly and quite amazing. But they've got a franchise quarterback and a heck of a coach in New England. They've got a franchise quarterback in Pittsburgh, so they're always there every year. They got a pretty dang good coach there as well. You look around the league, and those are the two major components, and you try to build around them and put a team around them. And I'm still marveled at what they're doing in New England over and above other teams. Of course, they've been cheating the whole time too, so who knows?
I was waiting for that.
It's so much harder to win year after year after year in this league. Even the teams that win the Super Bowl, they fall off sometimes too. Unless you're the Patriots. I mean, who is it? The Eagles are a prime example. They are struggling just as much as the Vikings are to get back in the playoffs. So, and they supposedly upgraded that quarterback.
Yeah, that's a huge surprise. I was it's amazing how things in the NFL change. Yes. My biggest argument for Cousins was how are we going to keep up with with the Eagles now that Wentz is back? They got to pull out all the stops, and Cousins has this, a good to great record against the Eagles, playing in that division, so on and so forth.
Confidence, Joe. Familiarity and confidence. And what's his name? Cousins is in a new division, playing different teams, and maybe he's not. There's all these adjustments that are maybe subtle and shouldn't mean anything. But unless you're so much better than everybody else around you, and the Vikings aren't. They're a good team, but they're not that much better than a lot of teams. There's some teams that are not as good. The Packers are not as good. The 49ers, the Cardinals. You can see some of these teams that are not good, but look at the Browns. They're going to be better next year.
The parity is ridiculous in the NFL.
It is.
The difference between good and bad teams isn't that much.
You can't expect anything. You just can't. You work the team works to win games, but you can't expect them to win. You can't. You can hope and predict and speculate all you want, but it just doesn't work this way. It's why it's such a fun league.
Quote unquote fun. Kyle Rudolph is nominated for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, which is pretty cool. You've met him a few times.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh, I still bring this up about once a week, but I was out at his youth camp. He seems to do a lot of stuff like that. And he seems like a genuinely good dude.
Yes, he's a great guy. And if you haven't seen that video that the Vikings Entertainment Network put together, that got to give a shout out to my old Timberwolves co-worker Skip Kruger, who heads that unit up over there. But they put out this video of Kyle reading letters that were sent to him by kids that he's helped from their families and the kids. And it's everybody says if you read this, it's going to make you cry, and it sure does. It's really. Wow. Yeah, it's well worth it. You should check it out. It's easy to find on Twitter.
I'll share a link to it in the article for this. So if people are listening to this, it's one of the hyperlinks at the top.
It's well worth it. The 5 minutes you spend on it. The guy is a great dude. He gets it. He really does. And I think it's people like Chad Greenway that was there before him and kind of showed him the ropes. This is what you do, and get in the community, get involved, and to be so involved with kids that are in so much pain and misery. I mean, that takes a special person, and Kyle Rudolph is that guy. He is a wonderful dude. There's no two ways about it.
So let's get into our predictions then. There's a few injuries. Trey Waynes it's looking like he won't play. This is a second concussion. Kendricks has been limited with the rib. Diggs' his knee, I think he was limited yesterday. BB has still been out, unfortunately, because I'd love to see what he could do at the third receiver spot, especially before the season's over. Morgan's still out with his knee, and Xavier Rhodes is was a full participant. But yeah, I mean, this game, it can't be overstated how important it is. I think if the Vikings win, their chances to make the playoffs go up to like 86%, and if they lose, it drops down to like somewhere in the 20s. So they definitely need to, I can't imagine that they won't be fired up for this game. Yeah, with all the personal storylines, Sheldon Richardson and Tom Johnson, it would be great to see the offense have some sort of balance, but also getting Thielen back on track, and having a healthy Diggs should help with that. But God, it's hard. I will be completely honest, which perhaps to a fault I typically am. And this is just, we've summed it up. We've talked about basically the entire history of the Vikings letting people down. And so I do feel like, I just have this feeling that they're just going to get stomped for some reason. And it's increasing with every day. And so I'm hoping that isn't the case. A lot of these big games, to be completely fair, the Vikings have been in every single one of them. It's just been mistakes here or there, turnovers especially, that have been the determining factor. But really, outside of the Bills game, and I'm probably forgetting another one, it's not like they've been just destroyed in these games. They've played with everybody, and the Bears are showing that they're not infallible. They're still young. They're giving the Vikings every opportunity to claw back and to maybe get to the point where the division is still an option. And so it all starts on Monday night. I'm just gonna do it. I think they'll lose, but I think it'll be within a touchdown. So I think it'll be 28-24, something like that. I just can't shake this feeling. Ooga chaka. Ooga chaka. So,
Al Jones Industrials were down last week too. So
I know, man. I'm telling you, my emotional volatility is like the cryptocurrency market. It's just all over the place. I hope I'm wrong, though, is the disclaimer I usually have.
What's your number?
The score? 28-24.
28-24 Seahawks. Okay. Well, I don't... They played enough big games and night games and primetime games this year that if this is still an excuse, it's time to blow them up. Then there's something mentally wrong with these people. They know how to prepare for these games. They know how to what they got to do. Everything's on the line. I think they will play well. I think they can play with this team. Both teams are going to be going for it. The Seahawks are ahead of the Vikings in the playoff race. They're the 5th seed, while the Vikings are 6th. So they have every bit as much on the line as the Vikings. Fans will be nuts in Seattle, as they are. And it'll be a tough game for them. But I guess I don't care, because they're all going to be tough at this point of the season. If you want to make the playoffs, they're going to be tough. So go out there and win a game. But balanced offense. I think the offense will be all right. I'm worried a little bit about Trey Wayne being out. They'll get Xavier back, which helps, and but that's a concern. The pass defense. Yeah, you really need Kendricks in there. I hope he will play. He's huge to this team. So, as I put on, it's going to be a tight one, and. It'd be nice to see Dan Bailey win it, 23-21 with a field goal in Seattle, and send everybody home bumming out there. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous, if people can't tell. Quick announcement. So Mr. Luke Braun from the Purple Journal podcast has moved on to a different opportunity. and it's, I believe, going to be hosting his own show on a different network. And so, as opposed to making a change this late in the season, we're going to be putting that show on hold and looking at either coming back next year or focusing more on this show and some other stuff that we've been doing on the Purple Territory Network. We have about 12 shows still, so I'm sure you can get your fill. But most importantly for those listening, that means that we are going to be looking to do our weekly Gnome giveaway here, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that. But typically we do a set of over-unders, which was what we were doing on Purple Journal. That's something that I'll put together before the game. Actually, I'll do it this morning, and I will tweet it, post it in the article for the show on Purple PTSD and Vikings Territory, and then I will let everybody know what Joe and I chose for the over-under. So typically it's a stat, over-under, Kirk Cousins 1 interception, so on and so forth. And if you pick the right one, you are entered to win a gnome, and then we choose someone from that list, and we mail out a batch of gnomes about once every month. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, definitely check that out and get involved. It's a lot of fun, trying to figure it out. It's something more to cheer for after, the Vikings get such a big lead against Seattle that you start.
It is really fun. It adds a different dynamic to the game, and it's unlike the score prediction, it's actually close between you and I. So
yeah, what is the prediction these days? I think I picked up 2 last week on you too. So we'll have to find that out.
It's a good. It's not as bad as it was last year, but
I'm sure everybody's worried. They want to know that. They can hardly go throughout the rest of their week without knowing.
I know people we're going to be despondent. We took this long to talk about it. But yeah, this has been the Purple Journal. Yikes! Morning Joe's Freudian slip. We will be doing a live chat of the game Monday night. I was under the weather last week, so I didn't show up, but I will be there for sure. Should be a lot of fun. It should be a great game. We'll see. But we will be back Tuesday morning, which should be gangbusters. But thanks for everyone for listening. Thanks for everyone who supported the Purple Journal podcast. Thanks to Mr. Luke Braun for all that he's done. And thank you, Mr. Joe. As always, you are the best. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. I'm going to take a sip from this human skull and say skull.